What's up guys, Asian here with another build video. Today we're going over the Dragonknight tank. DK tanks are pretty much exactly where they have been over the past few patches here, being one of the easiest classes to get into as a tank, as well as one of the easiest to masters as well. They're very effective tank, and most raid groups will have at least one DK tank in their group for the additional buffs that a DK tank is able to provide. So definitely, if you're starting to get into tanking, I highly recommend checking a look at DK tanks. They're great for beginners, and they're also surprisingly difficult to master as well with some of the debuffs that you have to provide for their group. So definitely great for both beginners and experts alike. So, just like the rest of our build videos, we will not be going over gear. That is reserved for the gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right-hand corner right about now. So if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear you should be running, go ahead and check out that video, and then come back here for the skills and a brief discussion on how tanking works in ESO and how DK tank differs from the other classes. So let's go ahead and get started here first with our sword and board bar. First, we have our taunt. We're running the Ransack morph rather than the Pierce Armor morph because we don't have a native source of minor protection, so we do need to get it from some other source. Ransack's going to be the easiest way to get it, although there are other ways to get the minor protection buff. Next, we have Heroic Slash. This provides the minor maim on whatever you hit, but more importantly, it provides minor heroism, which allows you to get your Warhorn up a little bit faster. So this is also a staple for pretty much any tank in endgame content. Next, we have Fragmented Shield here. You can also run the other morph, which is Igneous Shield. Igneous Shield grants you a bigger personal damage shield, while Fragmented Shield extends the duration of the major mending that you get from it. Really up to you which one you'd like. Major mending, the extension on that timing of major mending, does allow you to have a little bit more leeway when it comes to hitting Green Dragon Blood for the additional heal, but the larger personal shield from Igneous Shield also is a nice addition as well, so you can pick whichever morph you prefer. We have Green Dragon Blood as our burst heal. Obviously, this is a very powerful self-heal. It's probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, self-heal in the game across the board for any tank in any class. Next, we have a flex spot here. I have Unrelenting Grip here. This is to help pull in adds for trash fights. So chains will not work on what are called elite enemies. So those are enemies with the fancy health bars if you're playing with the base game UI. But it will work on other enemies as well. So you're able to pull them in and then use some sort of hard CC like Talons to keep them all grouped together, so your damage dealers are able to cleave all the adds down. So very important to have this skill locked and to master the use of chaining adds in and getting those stacks going. Next, for our ultimates, I have Reviving Barrier here. This is just for the Magicka Aid passive, so we get the 10% additional Magicka regen from the support tree. You don't necessarily need to have this. There are other ultimate options out there. Next, for our back bar, this is either going to be your Destruction Staff, Lightning, or Frost, or your bow bar if you're running a bow back bar. For all three weapons, we have Inner Rage as our ranged taunt. Then we have Balance as our source of magic sustain, as well as our source of resolve. There are other ways to get major resolve, but Balance is probably going to be the best way because it also provides you the additional Magicka regen. Next, we have Blockade of Storms to help proc off balance, as well as our enchant. You'll be running Blockade of Frost as an ice staff user, and you'll be running Endless Hail as a bow user instead. Next, we have Flex Spot here, Choking Talons. This is a hard CC to help keep things together for your damage dealers to burn down. Now, much like Chains, it will not work on elite mobs, but you still apply the minor maim, even if they are not Talons, so it does also act as a relatively expensive source of an AoE minor maim, but it is still a source to apply minor maim to multiple things at the same time. It also provides a synergy as well in trash, that's just to help out with Lakesti's uptime. Finally, we have Energy Orb. This is also a flex spot. Generally speaking, tanks will probably be running a Symphony of Blades, so you do need a way to heal your group, and Energy Orb is just the best way to do so. There are other moves you can run in place of Energy Orb, but I do recommend trying to find a move that heals the group in case you do need to run Symphony of Blades. Energy Orb is just the easiest because it lasts for a fairly long period of time. It has a lot of ticks. It has 20 ticks in total, plus it provides the healing combustion synergy to help your DPS sustain. While healers will also be running Energy Orb, just more chances to get some of that resource return is always nice to have. Finally, our staple ultimate, Aggressive Warhorn for the major force buff. Now, in terms of other abilities you might want to have on hand. First one is going to be Engulfing Flames. This is not going to be ideal to run on a DK tank, just because it does scale. The debuff does scale off of spell damage and max magicka. So you can see here we have a current value of 5% as our debuff value. Even with our major sorcery buffs and everything else, you're probably not going to break 6% or so. So this is better placed on either a DK healer or a mag decay DPS. So you're not really going to be running this all too often as a DK tank unless you have no other DKs in the group that are able to run this. Next we have Cauterize, which works as a sort of set and forget heal. It does heal other people as well. It's just not very reliable, so I personally don't recommend running Cauterize as a self heal or even a group heal as a tank. Under the Draconic power line, you have Deep Breath as an AoE interrupt. It has a 8 meter 360 radius, so you don't need to aim it like you would with Crushing Shock, for example. You can just activate it, and anything within 8 meters is interrupted if it's doing some sort of channeled ability. A really, really great ability here to have on hand. Next we have Protective Scale. You can choose either Morph Dragonfire Scale or Protective Plate. This reduces the damage you take from projectiles by 50% for 6 seconds, which is obviously very beneficial if you are in a fight with a lot of projectiles. So for example, if you're taking Zamaja, you can use this and take 50% less damage from her heavy attack, which is really, really powerful. Dragonfire Scale just basically reflects a little bit of damage, and Protective Plate grants you immunity to snares and mobilizations, so it's up to you which one you want to go for. Next we have Spiked Armor, which is a source of major resolve. Again, however, I find Balance to be a little bit more beneficial because it does return magicka back to you. Both morphs of Spiked Armor basically acts as a Thorn's ability, basically returning a little bit of damage to anything that hits you with direct damage in melee range. So while it does improve your DPS a little bit, generally speaking, just the additional magic sustain you get from Balance is going to be a better way to get that additional major resolve. And then the Earth in the Heart line. Cinder Storm is another way to heal yourself or the group here. Lasts for 18 seconds, so it's pretty decent. The only downside is it has a 5 meter radius, so fairly small radius, so you're just going to want to keep an eye on where you're placing it to make sure that you're hitting as many people as you can with this ability. Then for an ultimate, you have Magma Shell, which is really great for progression tanks or tanks who are just learning how to deal with a fight. Essentially is a get out of jail free card, basically makes you invincible for 12 seconds. Now you are limited. It does limit the damage to 3% of your max health, so if for whatever reason you take 34 hits within 1 second, then obviously you will die. But essentially it makes you invincible because you should be getting heals from a healer anyways. You can still get staggered, you can still get CC'd, but it does just limit the amount of damage that you're taking, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to kind of learn the fight mechanics and gives you a little bit more of a window to mess up here and there. Again, something for progression tanks or tanks that are just learning certain fight mechanics, not something you should be using on a regular basis. Next, under the Swordboard line, Defensive Posture, both Morph, Absorb Missile, and Defensive Stance have their uses. Absorb Missile is really great to help heal you, so for example, if you're the Portal tank in Cloud Rest, Absorb Missile is great because you get the heal from the Zamaja heavy attack as well as the orb projectiles that pop out whenever they break crystals. Defensive Stance is useful if you just want to do just raw damage. For example, Lakestes, if you're the main tank there, a common strategy is to tank him at range and use Defensive Stance to reflect his Frostbolt back at him to deal some little bit of additional damage. So both morphs there to have the situational uses. Next we have Shield Charge. Make sure to pick this up. You do need a gap closer specifically for Hall's Fabrication. So if you're running that trial, just make sure to pick up Shield Charge because you do need a gap closer for a few of the bosses there. Under the bow line, Endless Hail if you're running the bow back bar, and you also want to pick up Venom Arrow as a ranged interrupt. Destro Staff line, same thing, Elemental Blockade for the enchants, and then Crushing Shock for the ranged interrupt. We'll also mention you should pick up Elemental Drain. It's not very often that a tank will run it. This is more commonly going to be seen in 4-man content where you're running 3 DPS, 1 tank, but you could potentially run this in 12-man content as well, so just make sure to have this learned and ready. Under the armor skill line, immovable grants you some additional block mitigation. It is another source of major resolve. The downside is it does reduce your movement speed by a very large amount, so you will only be able to move essentially by dodge rolling. It also grants you immunity to knockback and disabling effect for 6 seconds, so could be useful where you need that immunity. Unstoppable Brute just reduces the cost of break free, so that could be useful, but immovable is going to be the better morph in most scenarios. Beyond that, let's see. Under the Fighter's Guild line, if you need another AoE heal, you can run Ring of Preservation. It does use stamina though, so just be mindful of your stamina pool, especially because you're a tank. Provides mana protection and also a small amount of healing, so if you need a way to heal other people, you could run Ring of Preservation. The radius, again, fairly small, it's 5 meters, pretty much the exact same radius as Cinderstorm, except it is centered on you, so your group members need to essentially be stacked on top of you in order to make use of the heal and the minor protection it provides. Under the Sigil Order line, Meditate can be pretty beneficial. If you don't want to run Balance, you just will lose out on the major resolve. Plus, because it is a challenge, you won't be able to block while you're meditating. The good thing is Sigil Order does have the Liberation passive, which does grant you major protection while you're channeling things, so you do get some damage mitigation, but obviously it's not the same amount of mitigation you would get from blocking. Then we have Temporal Guard if you want a passive source of mana protection, or you want to run Pierce Armor instead of Ransack, you can just slot Temporal Guard here instead of Reviving Barrier as your ultimate. Make sure to pick up all of the Undaunted abilities here. They're each very beneficial for their own reason. We have Overflowing Altar for the Minor Lifesteal and the Blood Feast synergy. The Minor Lifesteal does proc sets like Symphony of Blades, so it's an easy way to be able to proc out those sets there. Shadow Soak for the Black Widow synergy for your stamina DPS. The synergy is not quite as strong as it used to be, but it's still fairly strong. It's essentially free damage, so you might as well run it if you have the space to do so. Your ranged taunt, obviously. You have Bone Surge for the Spineless Surge synergy. This is just to help with Lakessi's uptime for your stamina DPS. The Major Vitality also does help you out in situations where you have healing debuffs going out to the group, for example, in Cloud Rest and Execute. Then Energy Orb for the heal, as well as the Healing Combustion synergy for additional resource return. Under the Alliance War line, if you need another way to heal the group, you can run Echoing Vigor here. This is a pretty decent way to heal the group here. It does also stack with other people's Echoing Vigor, so you don't necessarily need to worry about overriding a stamina DPS is stronger and bigger that way. And finally, we have Efficient Purge under the support line here in case you need to purge some debuffs from yourself or from the group. Typically speaking, a healer will be running this, but it's always nice to have a backup in case you need it yourself, because it does only cleanse a certain amount of people per cast. That pretty much covers it for all the skills you're going to want to have on hand as a tank. Now, in terms of tanking and ESO, those of you guys who are coming from other MMOs might think that tanking is essentially being a damage sponge and maintaining aggro, and while that is one job of the tank in ESO, your second job is just as important, and that is to help improve overall group DPS by providing buffs and debuffs. Buffs and debuffs come from two main sources. First is going to be your armor sets, and second is going to be from the abilities that you are able to run. So, for example, of a buff, you have Minor Courage from Yolnahkriin. That gives you weapon and spell damage, which helps improve overall group DPS. You also provide Minor Brutality for your stamina DPS by casting Fragmented Shield or Igneous Shield. So that helps improve weapon damage with 10%, so that is another way to help improve group damage. In terms of debuffs, you have sets like Alkosh, which reduces physical and spell resistance, that acts as a debuff. Then you obviously have things like Engulfing Flames, and possibly even Stone Giant if you're responsible for maintaining the Stagger debuff. So a lot of different buffs and debuffs that you need to maintain here as a support role. Obviously, your first job is to stay alive, it is to be the damage sponge, it is to maintain aggro, but once you have learned to fight and are comfortable with your survivability, then you want to transition over to trying to maintain good uptimes on your buffs and debuffs to help improve overall group DPS. What separates great tanks from mediocre tanks is mainly that buff and debuff uptime. So if you want to move up and do harder content, you will need to focus in on maintaining those buffs and debuffs and shy away from using more selfish-oriented sets or selfish-oriented abilities in favor of more group-oriented sets and group-oriented abilities instead. Now, DK tanks, they pretty much fall... There's nothing that really stands out with DK tanks, as in there isn't any sort of glaring strength or glaring weaknesses that a DK tank has compared to some other classes. they're just generally great all around. They have great abilities in their toolkits, they have great passives, they're very easy to play, and because of that, DK tanks still stand out, despite the fact they don't have any sort of glaring strengths or even glaring weaknesses compared to other classes here. That in and of itself is a reason to play the DK tank, because you have pretty much everything you need in the DK's toolkit. You have a hard CC, you have a chains that uses magicka rather than stamina, you have a good amount of debuffs you can provide. So all of that combined, the DK tank is sort of fits into this sort of jack of all trades, master of none tank. Basically makes them very easy for beginners to pick up, but also very rewarding for experts to play as well. But because of this, DK tanks still remain one of the best tanking classes in the game right now. Again, you will typically be seeing at least one DK tank in every single raid group here, mainly because they're just so versatile in their toolkits themselves. Well, that pretty much covers it for this tanking video. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I will also recommend, if you are trying to learn how to tank, to check out any of the tanking videos that I have in the stream's archive playlist. The best way to learn how to play a tank is obviously to play one, but the next best thing is to watch somebody else play it, and I pretty much main a DK tank whenever I play a tank, so I do recommend checking out those videos to kind of get a sense of how you should be playing a DK tank. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.